We'll now call the meeting to order. As the clerk advised, we have a quorum. Welcome to meeting number 12 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Human Resources, Skills and Social Development and the Status of Persons with Disabilities. Today's meeting, of course, again, is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to House Order of November 25th, 2021. Members will be attending in person in the room and will be attending virtually. Those attending virtually, you have the option of using the raised hand icon to notify me. Those members in the room simply indicate by raising your hand. Those attending in person must follow the pandemic protocols that are in place and changing on a weekly basis. I expect those members to do that. As the chair, I will enforce these measures for the duration of the meeting, and I thank members in advance for the cooperation. To ensure an orderly meeting, I would like to outline a few rules to follow. Members and witnesses may speak in the official language of their choice. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French if you're virtually. If interpretation is lost, please inform me immediately, and we will ensure interpretation is properly restored before resuming the proceedings. The raised hand feature is at the bottom of your screen. For members participating in the room, please keep in mind that raise your hand to get my attention. Before speaking, please wait for me to recognize you by name. Those in the room, your microphone will be controlled as normal by the Proceedings and Verifications Officer. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. When not speaking, your mic should be on mute. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. With regard to the speaking list, I have a speaking list that's been provided, and we will follow the speaking order. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Thursday, February the 3rd, 2020, the committee will commence its study of labor shortages, working conditions, and the care economy. I would like to welcome our witnesses to begin our discussion with 5 minutes of opening remarks followed by questions. From the Department of Employment and Social Development in this panel will be Karen Hall, Associate Deputy Minister, Strategic and Service Policy Branch, Rachel Wernick, Senior Assistant Deputy Minister, Skills and Employment Branch, Philippe Massé, Director General, Labour Market Information, Pierre Therin, Director General, Economic Policy Directorate, Strategic and Service Policies. We will start with a 5-minute opening comments from which witness is going to give that. Following the opening comments, we will open the floor for questions, and this will be a 1-hour session. So, to who from Employment and Social Development is going to do the 5-minute opening remarks? Please, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am Rachel Wernick, Senior Assistant Deputy Minister at ESDC. Je suis heureuse de me joindre.
I'm delighted to be here to provide an overall overview of the labour shortage in the Canadian economy. Labour shortages are affecting a number of sectors and almost every region in the country. In December 2021, there was approximately 900,000 job vacancies in Canada, which is almost the double of that recorded prior to the onset of the pandemic.
Short term and are likely to be filled as the economy strengthens. Approximately 2/3 or 64% of current vacancies are in jobs that require high school or less. Many of these will be temporary as the labor market reopens. More than 1/4 of vacancies are in the food service, tourism, and retail sectors. Other shortages are a result of structural factors, such as our aging population and rising skills requirements. This is increasing shortages in key sectors, such as construction, professional, scientific, and technical services, as well as healthcare. These shortages will take longer to fill, given the scarcity of high qualified workers among the unemployed and the need for specialized training. It's important to underscore that there are three sources of labor supply in Canada. The first is new entrants to the labor market, which are youth and immigrants. The second are groups underrepresented in the labor market who are not fully participating. And the third is those already working who need upskilling or reskilling to adapt and to stay in the labor force longer. To address the labor shortages facing the Canadian economy, it will be necessary to draw on all three sources of labor. Youth are our biggest source of new entrants to the labor market, with 4.9 million young job seekers expected to enter the workforce by 2028. All youth benefit from support to successfully transition from school to work, but it is important to recognize some youth face additional barriers, including Indigenous youth and youth with disabilities. The next new source of new labor supply is from immigration. Accessing this supply of labor will require addressing barriers many newcomers face to securing jobs. These include inadequate language proficiency, difficulties obtaining recognition of foreign credentials, and a lack of Canadian work experience. While temporary foreign workers play a critical role in filling jobs in the agricultural, food, and fish processing sectors, in fact, 80% work in agriculture, it is important to underscore that they make up only 0.4% of the labor force. So the next source of supply is underrepresented groups. Closing the gap in the labor market participation rate of underrepresented groups could mean adding over 2 million new workers to the labor market. And finally, 3/4 of the labor force of 2028 is already working. This is critical context, as labor shortages is not purely a numbers issue. It is also a skills mismatch issue. As the skills required for jobs continue to rise with the introduction of new technologies, most workers will need to upgrade their skills. As some jobs disappear, it will be important for workers to have access to training to upskill and reskill so they can fill new and emerging opportunities. As the committee will be putting a particular focus on the care economy, I would like to finish by highlighting some key facts about this sector. The impacts of COVID have been particularly concerning for care providers, including healthcare workers, personal support workers, and childcare workers, who have been on the front lines of the pandemic. Selon des données de statistiques,
According from data from Statistics Canada concerning the third quarter of 2021, there are about 118,000 job vacancies in the care economy. There are about 23,000 in childcare and personal support workers. If the healthcare sector has overall recovered from the job losses due to the pandemic, some healthcare professionals are still lagging behind. For example, early childhood educators are still at 12.3% below the levels recorded in January 2020. We need time to address the issue given the dearth of qualified workers among the jobless and the need for specialised training and skills. This problem is amplified by the difficulty of finding and retaining qualified persons in these fields. Sometimes it's about poor working conditions or poor compensation, low pay. Sometimes it's because it's costly to have foreign credentials recognition. We know that this is a provincial and territorial area of jurisdiction, and therefore the federal government is trying to bring together stakeholders around initiatives to address this labour shortage.
Has taken concrete measures to help reduce shortages facing the healthcare sector. These investments include $420 million in 2021-22 to support provinces and territories in attracting and retaining early childhood educators and support workers through initiatives such as grants and bursaries for students studying early childhood education. $960 million over 3 years for the new Sectoral Workforce Solutions Program to help key sectors of the economy, including the healthcare sector. It funds industry-driven activities that support a diverse and qualified supply of workers. The program helps workers through training and reskilling and helps employers, particularly small and medium-sized ones, to attract and retain a skilled workforce. $38.5 million over 3 years has been invested in a long-term and home care pilot, which is a project to test a new recruitment and training model for up to 2,600 supportive care assistants through a new micro certification. Of these, 1,300 are anticipated to go on to complete full personal support worker certification. The pilot will also explore how to improve consistency in training programs, required qualifications, and core competencies. And finally, an investment of $22 million for 20 projects through the Foreign Credential Recognition Program, which support the integration of internationally educated health professionals, and nearly $10 million in foreign credential recognition loans, of which 2/3 of the borrowers were in the health sector. We are continuing to work collaboratively with our federal partners and counterparts in provincial and territorial governments to help alleviate the pressures facing workers in the care economy. Thank you, merci. Nous sommes là pour répondre à vos questions.
We are here to respond to your questions. Thank you very much. Ms. Wernick.
Go to first round, open the floor to first round of questions with Madame Kusi for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. Ms. Wernick, I would be interested in knowing what the department is doing more to develop automation. What do you perceive is ESDC's role in stimulating automation to ease labor shortages?
I would suggest that ESDC, we are supporting the Minister of Workforce Development and Disability Inclusion. Our federal partner department in innovation, Innovation, Science, and Economic Development would be the department that has programs to invest directly in businesses. What I would say about automation as it is introduced is while it does displace low-skilled workers, it's predominantly being introduced for repetitive tasks, low-skilled work. It does still require skilled staff for its implementation, its uptake often, and its use. So while automation displaces some workers, it does create new skills requirements for others.
Thank you. And you mentioned your work with innovation, industry and innovation. Are you aware of any incentives for industries or employers to automate that ESDC in coordination with industry or innovation might have currently?
I don't have information on ISED programs at hand, but I would be happy to provide that in writing to the committee following this.
Thank you. Are there any programs available for automation in regards to skills development? So be it programs for skills development to learn more about automation or incentives for automation in regards to skills development?
Yes, the government in budget 2021 made a significant investment in what we are calling the Skills for Success program, formerly referred to as literacy and essential skills. And this is training in what we call foundational and transferable skills. And one of the key focuses, one of the skills for success, is in fact digital skills. And so this is programming that will support employers in training workers in improving their digital skills, their ability to work with technology and to implement digitalization in the workforce.
Thank you so much, Ms. Wernick. Monsieur Massé, I wanted to know where do these 1 million new jobs that the government has repeated over and over again that have been created, where did these 1 million new jobs come from, please?
I'm not aware of government statements about job creation. I think in our opening remarks, there's reference to job vacancies. Is that where you were headed? We can certainly outline some of the key sectors where those vacancies are present. I'm not aware of any particular statements regarding new jobs created.
Okay, it's something we hear in the House of Commons frequently, that 1 million new jobs have been created by this government, but looking at the information, it seemed more to me like this was just the natural recovery of the job market through the recovery of the pandemic. Monsieur Massé, yes, or Monsieur Therrien. Yes, okay, thank you.
Yeah, I might pass it to my colleague Pierre,
okay,
who would speak to that more.
So yes, the 1 million job is the that information comes from the Statistics Canada Labour Force Survey, and this is the survey that is updated every month. And the 1 million job that is my understanding of your 1 million job is that while we were in the middle of the pandemic, we had 1 million jobs that were below the level that we had before the pandemic, and then since then we are now at we increased the level of employment, so we're back to where we were before the pandemic.
Recovery.
We are at
Thank you. Likewise, when the government talks about 106% employment, would you say that is from a reduced worker base, a reduced worker pool? So the number would be higher because we have fewer employees now than we did at the beginning of the pandemic, since we've lost many to those. So I'm trying to get an accurate reflection of the 106% employment that we are hearing that the government has. It just seems to me if the workforce has shrunk, then it would require fewer workers actually to achieve 106% employment currently than it would have at the beginning of the pandemic.
So if I can add on that one.
Sorry, the time has gone out. You may be able to address that answer in a further question, Mr. Massé. Now to Madame Ferrada for 6 minutes. You have the floor.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. I'd like to hear your input. As you're aware, Quebec several years ago put in place its own childcare system, which at the time was a way to strengthen a female labour force. And in the midst of the pandemic, we've noted that women have been among the hardest hit. How do you see the implementation of a pan-Canadian childcare system? How will it help in some way fill a labour shortage gap? Is there a correlation between the two?
Je vais commencer.
Response. I'll speak briefly and then I'll hand the floor to Karen Hall, who's an expert in this. But we know based on the Quebec experience that the introduction of a universal childcare system resulted into a significant increase in the participation of women in the workforce. And we fully expect that that would occur in other regions too.
Sure, thank you. And Mr. Chair, if I may, I just want to make sure that I'm the Associate Assistant Deputy Minister, not the Associate Deputy Minister. So just want to make sure that's correct for the record. Alors, pour la question.
As to the question, well, I thank you for it. We expect that a pan-Canadian national childcare system will have a significant impact on the labour market across Canada. It is our contention that the new system may add up to 240,000 workers to the labour force. That's over the long haul. It takes time for that kind of change to materialise and take place, but it will be significant. Quite clearly, there is a need for workers in that system. It's absolutely crucial that we have a sufficient labour force for that sector that's well trained, that's skilled, so that they can provide good quality care to children.
Merci pour cette...
Thank you very much for that answer. Earlier, you spoke about a pilot project of $3.5 million to address long-term care issues. Are there any other pilot projects that you're currently working on to address the labour shortage? But I'm particularly interested in long-term care and what you're doing in collaboration with the provinces in order to address the labour shortage in long-term care.
Oui, Monsieur Char.
Yes. Well, I can lay out that pilot project for you. And let me just come back to the context of the pandemic first. There was a major shortage of workers during the pandemic for all the reasons that we all understand. We've tried to bring together, in short order, partners to come up with an innovative model to recruit and train a greater number of workers in a shorter time frame. It's kind of a classic example here of what can go on. The federal government plays a key role here in gathering human resources to explore innovative solutions. And then the idea is to replicate this across the various provinces and territories respectively. Now, in this particular case, when it comes to training for these positions, well, oftentimes those who are interested in filling those positions don't want to go back to full-time studies. So we have a pilot project to test online training. Well, it's partially online. It's an intensive training program that students can take at times that suit them. Then there's an on-the-job internship, and this is something that's really sought after, i.e. the opportunity to sink your teeth into a real-life experience as opposed to just in the classroom. Now, the other advantage of this is the micro-certification. So after you take the online training, after you do the internship, those individuals get the title of assistant. And they don't have the complete certification at that stage, so they have fewer responsibilities, but half of them go on to complete their certification. And that's an innovative model that has been recognised as a successful way of filling this gap and making up this shortfall. This is a really great pilot project that we can perhaps emulate. We're talking about people here who aren't ready to go back to full-time school, but they have mortgages and bills to pay. And the other thing...
Madame Warwick, probably you could conclude that in answering another question. We are over time. Now, Madame Chabot, à vous la parole.
The floor is yours, Ms. Chabot. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson, and thanks to the witnesses. Well, this is an absolutely crucial issue. Thank you for the documents and submissions you've made to us, as well as the statistics. But all of this begs the question, how do you collect data on labour shortages, both nationally and regionally? I'm trying to come to grips with that. Let me flesh out my question. We know that when it comes to a labour shortage, there are labour shortages which can be categorised as structural ones, because there's a mismatch between those persons trained and the demand in the labour market. And then there are organisational labour shortages, which have to do with the way the workplace is organised. And then there's some jobs from province to province to province that aren't the same thing. For example, a personal support worker in Quebec isn't the same as in another province. So how do you come to terms with all of that and make sure that we have the right data we're using?
Je peux peut-être commencer.
Perhaps I can take a stab at that. No, please do go ahead, Pierre. Well, let me tell you how the data is collected. The first thing you need to understand is that there's a very important source of information, which is Statistics Canada. And just let me find the right terminology in French. I don't have it at my fingertips. So, yes, job vacancies. So a job vacancy doesn't necessarily amount to a labour shortage or equate to a labour shortage, but we do collect statistics on employers who have a certain number of job vacancies. However, it's quite a normal phenomenon to have job vacancies or open positions, which attests to the fact that when a company is growing or when there's attrition due to people retiring, well, those businesses and companies have to go on a hiring recruitment. But currently, the job vacancies are a tad higher than what we saw pre-pandemic. Thank you very much. Thank you for making that distinction, because a job vacancy doesn't necessarily equate to a labour shortage. For example, in Quebec, among nurses, there are full-time job vacancies. Why is that? Because some people just don't want to do those full-time jobs. Now, another question. If we look at our labour shortage in Quebec, we have a labour shortage plan for top priority sectors, and the government is investing $3.5 billion over 5 years to meet our objectives for upskilling and reskilling, both in the care economy, as we've coined it, and also in IT and engineering and in the building sector. Are there examples from other provinces? You did say that this is a provincial area of jurisdiction, so have other provinces put in place measures, and could we have data on those, please?
Mr. Chair, I have a few examples of work in provinces. So the Government of Canada transfers approximately $3 billion to provinces through the labour market transfer agreements. And with that funding, we know we have had reports of several different projects related to healthcare. For example, work in New Brunswick on personal support workers, where they use the funding to pay tuition for training seats. Work in Prince Edward Island, which is focused on increasing the number of licensed practical nurses and resident care workers. A 2-year pilot in Alberta, where they are offering English as a second language pathway for healthcare aides. and in Ontario, a virtual training program in the long-term care sector. So those are some examples that we know of programming in provinces in this area that were funded through the federal labor market transfer agreements.
Jacques Caron.
Do any have any time left, Mr. Chair? Well, when it comes to services in Quebec, we have what's called early childhood education services. It's far broader than just childcare, and you have to have specific qualifications to hold the position of educator. So when you refer to a labour shortage in that sector, are you comparing apples to apples? Because qualifications vary from province to province, don't they? I just want to make sure we're comparing apples with oranges. Or apples with apples and not apples with oranges. Response. Well, let me start with the example of the personal support workers. And that was what I was going to finish up with in my previous response. We know that there are 20 different titles for that kind of work. And we know that there are differences between the certifications, the kind of training that's required, and differences in terms of standards.
Pilot project was looking at was how could achieve better commonality in the training, the standards for personal support workers. I'll turn to my colleague Karen Hall if she wants to speak more specifically to that issue with respect to childcare workers.
Sure, thank you.
We're out of time. You will have to address that information at a subsequent question. Now to Madame Zerillo for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much for the presentation. And I did want to start with some hopeful news today for youth. The biggest portion of the new employees are youth, and I just wanted to ask some questions on that. Many of my questions today are going to be gendered, because work is very gendered, and I'm hoping that we can, through this study in this committee, remove some of the stigmas that go along with gendered work. But for the youth, are there federal strategies for women and underrepresented youth, including youth with disabilities, that are already in place? And are there some strategies?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So there are several programs. For youth, we have the Youth Employment and Skills Strategy, which is actually delivered by 12 different federal departments and has a primary focus on reaching youth who are underrepresented in the labor market and providing them the additional supports required to successfully secure and sustain good jobs. We also have a student work placement program, which helps students find work placements in their fields of study. And we prioritize youth who are underrepresented in the labor market for that program as well. With respect to women, we have launched a women's employment readiness pilot program to really explore and better understand what women from different backgrounds require as tailored supports: racialized, Indigenous women, women with disabilities, women from the LGBTQ2+ community. So that's another area of focus. And you spoke of youth with disabilities. Youth with disabilities are a primary recipient of our Opportunities Fund for Persons with Disabilities, which provides pre-employment supports training to youth with disabilities, but also works with employers to create accessible, inclusive workplaces and hire more youth with disabilities.
And just to follow up, thank you for that. And just to follow up on that, so is there data and disaggregated data collected on those programs and to understand which industries, which channels, potentially gendered, age, and race are picking up in those programs?
We do have some disaggregated data for, I will be frank, some of the programs have better data than others, but we could provide what data we have, demographic data on clients for our programs in writing.
Thank you. And one other question on youth before I move on to the difficulty keeping skilled people. I want to ask about housing. So what I'm hearing out for those that work with personal support workers and those in the care economy, even not-for-profits, they're having a very hard time finding workers because of the housing prices. Is there any data correlations made between labor markets and house prices? And it's focused on youth. I mean, it's for everyone, but is there data around youth and the labor market and housing?
Yes, thank you. The subject that you are pursuing, of course, is very vast. There is research that shows that there are systemic barriers that impact people's success in the labor market in acquiring and keeping jobs, which range from adequate housing to childcare, to access to transportation. There are different barriers that can definitely impact the ability of youth in that sense, specifically. But again, we're from the Department on Workforce Development. We would have to pull together some of that research on housing and its impacts on employment, working with some other departments if the committee was interested.
Yeah, I'm just interested in, do you choose a career or a job because, like you said, you're close to transit, or you happen to live in a place that has a hospital nearby or childcare facility? But I'm going to move on to the difficulty keeping skilled workers due to poor working conditions. And again, this is a data question. Is there additional data or information on some of these problematic working conditions? And is there some disaggregated data, again, on that, thinking about how work is so gendered?
So I can start, and then maybe Pierre and Philippe, if you want to add anything on the data sources, they are the data experts. We have seen a wage stagnation in Canada, but it is starting to improve. And over the last 2 years, due to the impact of the pandemic, employers have increased wages in many occupations.
You're not talking to Alex?
Where labor shortages continue to be an issue.
Madame Wernick, could you just
yeah, sorry,
hold
somebody's
for a moment?
yeah.
Yes, does somebody, have we got that cleared? Okay, continue, Madame Wernick, and we'll let you answer the question in its full.
I think I'll pass it over. I'll pass it over to Pierre because I think the member is interested in the different data sources.
Remarks short.
Yes, I will just say that this is an important question. I'll go back to what I said before about the labor force survey, which have good data, but the last budget provided additional money for Statistics Canada to provide more disaggregated data. So those are coming. They are in the process. We don't have all of these data yet, but I know that Statistics Canada is working quite closely with provinces and so on and so forth to get better data on getting better gendered and also disaggregated data. I'll just stop there.
So Farron, now to Mr. Ruff for 5 minutes. Mr. Ruff.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks to the witnesses for coming. So, look, I represent Bruce Grey Owen Sound, a very rural riding in Ontario, and a very aging demographic. I think I got the second oldest demographic in the province of Ontario. Labor shortage is huge. It's the biggest thing I heard throughout the most recent federal election. But it doesn't matter what sector. I'm hearing it from my farmers, the agricultural sectors, the food processors like Exeldor, Maple Leaf Foods in my riding. The wood manufacturing cluster of Ontario has reached out to me. The auto industry, we can't even get a mechanic. They're robbing Peter to pay Paul. As well, the PSWs, healthcare sector, everybody is hurting, as you can understand why. One of the issues that they've all reached out, and it's been a common thread across all sectors, is the need to augment and do an emergency temporary foreign worker program. As such, I'd like the feedback from the witnesses on the viability of this as a recommendation. If a specific industry experiences a job vacancy rate of over 5%, a labor market, would it be viable to remove the requirement for a labor market impact assessment, an LMIA, to hire temporary foreign workers, and then when that vacancy rate then drops back under 5% for 6 consecutive months, that LMIA could be reinstated? Any feedback?
So the intent of the labor market impact assessment is to ensure the entry of foreign workers will not have an adverse effect on the Canadian labor market, and that the employer and job offer are legitimate. Protecting the health and safety of temporary foreign workers while they're in Canada is of top importance. And there is concern that suspending LMI requirements could limit the government of Canada's ability to protect workers from potentially negative situations, such as employer abuse or poor working conditions. There is also a risk in some areas that wage rates in the sectors could be negatively affected, both for the temporary foreign workers and Canadians. But I would like to say that the government is currently considering different reforms to the program to enhance and streamline it. But as I did mention in my opening remarks, it will never be a very full solution, because it is still a very small number relative to the Canadian labor market of foreign workers that we would be able to receive in the country.
All right, I can acknowledge that to some extent, but I think the struggle is even more apparent in rural Canada. So I'd like any feedback on how we're going to deal with that in rural Canada, where we just don't have the labor force. As I said, our unemployment rate has been, never lower really, for some extent, even despite the pandemic and the challenges. And I guess tying to that too is the skilled trade requirements needed, because until that's up and running, we need to put food on the table. We need to, take care of our seniors. And I really think the idea of putting a temporary foreign worker program, like speeding up the process, this is an urgent requirement that I think needs to be addressed now. Could you expand on the rural side of the House, please?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure I understand the question. The role of temporary foreign workers in rural parts of the country?
Specifically in rural Canada, any of the programs, ma'am, that would help support rural Canada?
Mm-hmm. Well, as I mentioned, 80% of temporary foreign workers work in agriculture, so they are working largely in rural areas currently. And I do think it is an important point to recognize there are specific labor market challenges to rural areas. There have been some successful work in attracting new immigrants to rural areas. The experience suggests that if you get a critical mass of new immigrants and a community started, more will come. And so that is one of the efforts that is taken for getting workers into different parts of the country. The government announced in Budget 2021 a new program that we are looking at called the Community Workforce Development Program. And it's about funding communities to do workforce development, to bring all the players to the table to explore how they can do a better job of matching workers with openings in their communities, including how to reach the underutilized sources of workers, such as underrepresented groups that I mentioned earlier. And so when you have all of the partners together and the appropriate community organizations and employers to come up with solutions at the community level.
Nick, now for 5 minutes, Mr. Coteau.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I want to first,
direct your question to somebody specifically, so we can make the best use of our time. Up to any of the witnesses or them.
Yeah, I'll just ask a general question, and the witnesses can determine who's best to answer. I want to start by saying thank you to the member for bringing this forward. I think this study is so essential and so important today in Ontario, right across the country. One of the issues that I've always seen, and it doesn't seem like any government across the country or the federal government's really figured how to utilize foreign-trained professionals. For example, I think an extreme case would be doctors. And I know in Ontario, I think it's like 7% of doctors who are foreign-trained actually end up being doctors in Ontario. That's a huge underutilization of a workforce, of a group of specific people. So I'd like to know what the federal government's working on to accelerate credentials for foreign-trained workers. What's worked in the past, what's being identified as successful, being amplified, what's being changed, and how do we align our immigration specifically to fill in those gaps where we need specific skill sets by foreign-trained professionals? To any of the witnesses.
You, Chair. Yeah. Again, I'll start, and if others can add. I would like to speak to the Federal Foreign Credential Recognition Program that I mentioned in my opening remarks. And this program is very much about, as I said, the federal role in convening the different partners that it takes to bring down the barriers to skilled immigrants being able to use their skills in the labor force. And what we have seen is in addition to support for navigating the certification process, and I think it's important to note that this is very much in the hands of the regulatory bodies at the provincial level. So we have to work very closely with them, as well as professional associations. But we have found that our loan program has made a huge difference. We have a zero default on these loans in supporting new immigrants in navigating that process and successfully completing it in terms of the recognition process. The other thing that is really key is Canadian work experience. And so through this program, we support projects that get foreign trained professionals into the workplace, into work placements to get hands-on experience and get that experience on their resumes, and that is very key. The projects that I mentioned, the 20 projects that I mentioned in the opening remarks, the vast majority are focused right now on healthcare professionals ranging from physicians, nurses, pharmacists, dentists, midwives, ultrasound technicians, physical therapists, medical laboratory technologists. So we have a lot of work going on right now about supporting foreign trained.
Back in, I don't mean to be rude, but I wanted to ask a second question, if that's okay.
Sure.
I think I probably have 2 minutes left, Chair. Okay, thank you so much. And maybe I'll ask the question to the assistant deputy minister, if that's okay. Is that you? Are you the assistant deputy minister? I know someone came on.
There are two assistant deputy ministers here, myself and Karen.
So you've been answering a lot of the questions. I'll just throw this one out if anyone wants to take it. In my community, in Don Valley East, we have a lot of unemployed young people. It's hard to find work. Has the government done anything to align procurement process specifically on government spending to filling in some of those labor shortages. So, aligning it with education and people who are looking for types of work, and then how we spend government money for massive procurement processes. I think it's community benefit programs. That's my question.
So I'm answering the question as the senior person here, but we were invited to speak to labor shortages. I would have to look into getting you information about procurement from our federal partners and other departments.
Right, okay. Just the tapping into young people in communities, especially, some rural communities, Indigenous, racialized communities, where we have this huge potential of young people who are, who can work, but the skill alignment sometimes is off. So the question is, have you heard of any type of procurement aligned with identifying specific, accelerating specific skill development?
So in ESDC, we work closely with...
Madame Wernick,
Sorry.
We're
Yes.
over time.
Thank you so much.
If you could provide a written answer to the committee for Mr. Coteau's question, that would be good.
Sure.
Sorry, we need to keep on schedule. I'm going to finish with Madame Chabot, this round with Madame Chabot and Madame Zerillo for 2.5 minutes each. Madame Chabot.
Ça va être une question sur...
Thank you. My question will have to do with the long-term care pilot projects and in-home care. I just don't get it. I don't understand how the federal government is investing money in pilot projects for training of care professionals, whereas this is a provincial area of jurisdiction. The federal government has no business getting into training programs. Let me give you an example. In Quebec, in other provinces, I know that for personal support workers, there are professional guilds, professional orders. This isn't the federal government's bailiwick. Why is there a pilot project regarding the training of care aides? Who is asking for this exactly? Wouldn't it be better to leave it up to the provinces, or to do this by virtue of healthcare transfers, so the provinces have the funds they need to do what falls under their jurisdiction?
This is a pilot project, voluntary participation. Several provinces are collaborating with us, as well as colleges across the country. What we discovered during the pandemic is the fact that it is incredibly diverse, not consistent, not standard in terms of the training, the competencies. It made it mobility is very, very difficult, and it wasn't easy for workers to move between areas of the country to work. It also is a factor in professionalizing the job, because it's difficult to know what the standards are, what the pay will be, and it's inconsistent across the country. So there was an interest in collaborating on this pilot and this innovative program. It's not mandatory, it's not prescriptive, but it will find some interesting results to be shared.
Thank you, Madame.
Pourquoi ça devrait être uniforme?
Why should it be consistent across the board?
Thank you. Time has ran out. We'll now go to Madame Zerillo for 2.5 minutes to close out this hour.
Thank you.
Hour.
I'm going to, again, it's going to be a gendered question and really around the care economy, and it's going to be about pay equity. So I was looking at the StatsCan release from January 25th that talks about 1/5 of the employed labor forces working in care occupations, and that women make up the majority of that paid care in Canada. And unfortunately, immigrant women and those from visible minority groups were less likely to hold well-paid care positions. in relation to their male counterparts. So I guess my question is just around what tools does the federal government have to correct the pay equity gap? And keeping in mind what I heard today around the child care piece is that we're going to have a lot more child care workers. So how can the federal government help in that pay inequity?
Well, I would start, Mr. Chair, by building on the last question and saying that the remuneration of healthcare workers is within provincial territorial jurisdiction.
Make some comments about the upskilling and microskilling. I'm so happy to hear this, and I've heard this out in the community as well. There's a small group of post-secondary educators that are coming together across Canada, and I just was wondering if there is data available. I really appreciated the comments today about not having to engage in full-time schooling, which can be difficult for women and people that care for family or children. So I'm wondering if there is any data about which industries which industries are popular in this microskilling, upskilling, and if there's any disaggregated data around gender, race, and even age on this upskilling, microskilling.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you are correct that one of the drivers for that long-term home care pilot was how to improve recruitment and to meet the needs of what is largely a pool of racialized women who work in this sector. And that's why some of these innovative training models are what is helpful in terms of supporting those women. Currently, that is the only pilot we have in the healthcare sector that's sort of specifically looking at upskilling and reskilling. It's in the long-term home care, personal support worker space.
Okay.
And thank you, Madame Wernick. At this time, I would like to, this concludes the first panel, and I would like to thank the witnesses for appearing and providing the information they did. So thank you, witnesses. We'll suspend for a few minutes while we transition to the second round. Thank you, department personnel, for being available and answering, and I would anticipate you would follow up in written submissions to the committee on those questions that were technical and required statistical information to give. Thank you. From the Business Development Bank, Monsieur Pierre Cleroux, Madame Shannon Glenn. From the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, Madame Leah Noor. From the Canadian Labour Congress, Monsieur Vipon and Monsieur Roberts. And I would welcome each of these organizations. You have 5 minutes to give opening statements to the committee, and I would ask that you stay within the 5 minutes to give the committee members ample time to question. So we'll begin with the opening statement from the Business Development Bank for 5 minutes, whoever wants to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to make this statement. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Inutile de présenter longuement BD.
There is no need for a lengthy introduction to BDC, which has 75 years of experience and increased visibility since the beginning of the pandemic. However, the Business Development Bank of Canada is the only bank dedicated solely to entrepreneurs and business people. We are a Crown corporation reporting to Parliament through the Minister of Small Businesses, Export Promotion and International Trade. We operate as a lender and investor at arm's length from the government. In this sense, we are a complement to private sector lenders rather than a competitor. This means that we take more risk than other financial institutions, and when the economy falters, we step in. During the pandemic, for example, we provided $2.8 billion in direct financial support and over $4 billion indirectly in collaboration with financial institutions across the country. We also provide venture capital and advisory services.
Context that I'm here. My economics research team supports not only internal planning within BDC, but also our clients through regular publication of free reports and analysis to help them understand the economic context in which SMEs operate. These reports are framed as high-level observation about economic and market trends, coupled with practical advice for the entrepreneurs. This labor shortage study builds on a similar study we did in 2018. Some of the key observations, starting with demographic trends that are well known but interesting to repeat. Proportion of people age 65 and or more has increased from 13% in 2000 to 19% in 2021. Baby boomers are leaving the workplace while the working age population is growing at a slower pace. From 2000 to 2012, the labor force increased by 12%, but it's only expected to grow by 3.8% in the current decade and could even be less. In other words, labor shortages are here to stay, especially in light of the expected demand for workers. There on the top of these long-term trends, the pandemic amplified the issue. Without COVID, there would be more than 440,000 more people in Canada. Immigration declines by half because of COVID restrictions. The situation should resume in 2022. Further, 20% of workers who've lost their job during the pandemic changed fields of employment. As a result, the number of job vacancies more than doubled since 2015, with the gap particularly felt in accommodation and food services, as well as manufacturing. These shortages have an impact on entrepreneurs, but there are actions that they can take. There are implications for limited growth, pressures on existing employees, compensation expectations, and ability to meet orders. The impacts are across the country, with businesses having difficulty hiring, ranging from 29% in the prairies to 67% in Ontario. Entrepreneurs have already adopted approaches to mitigate these pressures, including 37% of entrepreneurs have adopted flexible work arrangement, 35% of them are providing more internal training, and 26% of them are recruiting younger workers. In addition to these tactics, our advice is that the following 4 proven strategies can help the most in recognition that shortage of labor it's a problem that is here to stay. Use a formal hiring process, offer a competitive total compensation package, expand their hiring pool. And finally, and perhaps the most important advice that we give to businesses is to since the shortage of labor is here for us, with us for quite a long time, is to invest in technology and automation. Our study is showing that technology adoption is best strategy against shortage of labor. Canadian businesses using automation are performing better and growing faster. Technology is now available for all sectors, including services and retail. In that context, I want to highlight that BDC is pleased to contributing our efforts to the Canada Digital Adoption Program, which was launched today by the Prime Minister and Mr. Ning. As part of Stream 2 of CDAP, Budget 2021 announced $2.6 billion for the Business Development Bank of Canada to help SMEs finance their implementation of their technology adoption plan. BDC will offer a zero-interest loan to improve productivity, better serve consumer, and become more competitive. Thank you for your attention. I hope this will lay a frame for a good discussion.
Thank you, Monsieur Clergeau. The Canadian Chamber of Commerce, Ms. Nord, for 5 minutes or less.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Vice Chairs and committee members, fellow panelists. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and make an appearance this afternoon. I'm speaking to you from Ottawa, the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. I go by the pronouns she, her, elle, and today I'm wearing a white blouse, a blue blazer, a green scarf, and I'm working from my home office. I am speaking on behalf of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, which is Canada's voice of business. We represent 200,000 businesses across the country, across sectors and across sizes, including a network of 450 local chambers and boards of trade from coast to coast to coast. I am the Canadian Chamber Policy Lead on Workforce Strategies and Inclusive Growth. This includes our work with the Council for Women's Advocacy and our BIPOC Leadership and Inclusion Council. We are all aware of the labor shortages in this country. There are currently an unprecedented 1 million job vacancies in Canada. Vacancies in healthcare, construction, manufacturing, accommodation, and food services, along with retail trade, are currently leading the way. Yet we have shortages across sectors, communities, and regions, and affecting every size of business. I'm able to say, thanks to reports like those from Monsieur Clergeau, that businesses, including small businesses, are citing labor shortage as one of their most, if not their most significant, barriers to economic growth. I can also tell you, for example, that between now and 2030, construction employment is expected to rise by 65,000 workers. I can tell you that in the residential construction sector, that between now and 2030, approximately 620,000 workers are needed, and calculating retirements versus new entrants, there'll be an expected gap or need of 40,000 workers. I can tell you the age distribution of the construction workforce. I can tell you how many women, Indigenous peoples, and new Canadians work in the trade. I can actually even break these numbers down by jurisdiction. What I can't do, for example, is the same for the childcare and early learning professions. How many are currently employed in Canada? Where are they employed? How many are needed in the coming years, especially in light of new federal investments? I can't turn to a sector association, a professional association, or an employment table, and I can't even look to StatsCan data. Therefore, our first and overarching recommendation is for labor market information and analysis, demand-side workforce planning for key professions and sectors in the care economy. The federal government can and should play a leadership role in facilitating, convening, and funding these efforts. I also referred earlier to the Canadian Chamber's Council for Women's Advocacy. It was established in January 2020 as part of our Inclusive Growth campaign and currently consists of a 15-member executive table. We were initially headed down one pathway of focus before the pandemic, but as with so much else, all changed with the pandemic and our focus has shifted and we've pivoted as well. Through the 24 months of the pandemic, we have tracked the disproportional effect of the pandemic that it has had on women in the workforce. This is both as employers, business owners, and female entrepreneurs, as well as employees. We have also differentiated between women in the care-exposed economy versus those in the remote or work-from-home economy. Although there are challenges and significant ones for women in each, We have acknowledged that women in the care and exposed economies have been particularly burdened and that they are among the most marginalized. Further, we have underscored that childcare and early learning is an economic and not a women's issues. It is one of three pillars of recommendations we have made to the federal government. And one of our recommendations within this is, and I quote, ensure that there is an ample and diverse workforce of childcare providers across the country by enabling remote learning for potential childcare provider certification in rural areas, providing more money to increase access to early childhood education programs, and facilitating labor mobility and certification across domestic and international borders. We have likened childcare and early learning to social infrastructure. And just like traditional infrastructure, like a bridge or a road, it will not materialize without a labor force to build and maintain it. We need an ample, diverse, qualified, and motivated workforce throughout the care economy and a dynamic ecosystem that supports it in order to ensure an inclusive recovery and economic growth that's necessary for this country. I have a lot more to say on the care economy, temporary foreign workers, FQR, procurement and diversity policies, but I will leave it there. And
Good.
Look
You may
forward
be
to
able to
your
get to
questions.
those.
Thank you.
Yes, Madam
Yeah.
Nord, in some of your answers. We'll now go to the Canadian Labour Congress, who is going to give the opening comments.
I am Siobhan Vipond. Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you on this important subject. The Canadian Labour Congress advocates on national issues on behalf of 3 million working people. Many of the workers we speak of on behalf of work in Canada's childcare, education, healthcare, social services, community care, and seniors care sectors. This HUMA community study focuses on labor shortages, working conditions, and the care economy. In our view, the staffing challenges in the care economy result from the following causes: heavy demand of unpaid work among a workforce dominated by women, staffing shortages fueled by years and even decades of fiscal austerity and spending cuts, leading to high workloads and poor retention, low wages and poor working conditions, rising harassment and violence, and a lack of a workforce planning. While the pandemic had us celebrating care workers as heroes, all of these challenges were not only exposed, but compounded, bringing care workers and care sectors to a breaking point. We need a new strategy of systematically investing in care workers to supply current and future labor needs. One important step in the direction of this new strategy is the progress towards a national system of affordable, accessible childcare in Canada. This is a crucial investment in women's full and equal labor market participation. We want this to result in well-paid and high-quality early learning and childcare jobs. To continue to combat inequalities in the gender division of paid and unpaid care and ensure decent jobs and high-quality care for children, adults, and seniors, it's essential to invest in high-quality public services and workforce planning now. That's why we are urging the government to establish a Care Economy Commission to develop and implement a broader care strategy for Canada. At its heart must be a workforce planning strategy for Canada's future care economy workforce. Now, I'd like to offer some critical perspectives on the way labor shortages are portrayed in the media. In Economics 101, if demand for workers exceeds salaries will be bid up until the market clears. And most labor shortages should disappear as employers raise wages and attract more workers. However, wage growth has actually been modest. Year over year, average hourly wage growth has been about 2.6% over the last 3 months. This is in line with pre-pandemic wage growth and well behind inflation. Wage offers for new hires in some job categories has risen faster. But in many industries and occupations where employers are complaining about labor shortages, wage increases have been slower than average. And this ought to be one clue that there's more to the story. Another clue is employers have been complaining about labor shortages all the way through this pandemic. And in May 2020, the official jobless rate in Canada was 13.7%. 1/3 of the labor force was jobless and wanting work, or underemployed and wanting more hours of work. Despite this, employers began to complain about labor shortages. In reality, when we hear the complaint about labor shortages, what we are hearing is that it's difficult to find workers with exactly the right skills, attitude, and work experience needed at the prices that an employer is willing to pay. Now, to be sure, there are long-standing and genuine skill shortages in specialized skilled trades. Outside the building trades, however, employers often expect workers to show up ready to work on the employer's term, having already accumulated the precise skills and work experience required. The notion that employers are responsible for recruiting and retaining employees and then training and developing them to meet the changing skills needs seems to be abandoned. And to be sure, there are many employers that invest in training and workforce development to cope with current and anticipated labor needs. But most employers in Canada invest very little in training and workforce development. When employers do provide training, they tend to provide it to workers who already have high levels of education attainment. Workers who need the training the most are the least likely to receive it. From a lack of workplace pensions and benefits, to a lack of learning and training opportunities, to an absence of paid sick leave and adequate health and safety protections, far too many workers in this country are treated as disposable. This approach is a recipe for ongoing complaints about unfilled job vacancies and an inability to find workers. It's why unions talk about a good job shortage instead of labor shortage. Now, I'll stop here, but I would be happy to elaborate on any of this in the response to the members' questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Vipon, for those very informative comments. We'll now go to questioning from the committee members, beginning with Madame Kusi for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much to all of the witnesses for being here today. My first question is for Ms. Nord. Ms. Nord, what do you think the government could be doing more of to help with the labor shortage?
Good afternoon, and thank you for the question, MP. We at the Canadian Chamber talk a lot about demand side labor market information. It's not very, for lack of a better word, sexy or attractive, but this is the missing piece, a lot of the workforce puzzle. I only caught some of the previous comments as well, but for example, with the labor force numbers, there's a lot of detail and work going into it. Kudos where kudos is due, but that's only from the supply side of the story. It's not from the demand side, unfortunately. And a lot of the data that does come in is already, dated and looks back instead of forward. So helping in that workforce planning, particularly from a demand side, would be appreciated. And we talk about, and we can split some hairs here, but jobs without people and people without jobs. So help facilitating that what we call matchmaking. And in the first instance, it's analysis that's required, right? Is it people who don't have, do people have the skills and it's just they're not getting to the right jobs? Is it, there's labor mobility issues here in the country as well, where jobs are located, so on and so forth? Or is it this need for upskilling and reskilling? And what I will say is, we heard a lot of pilot projects going on, across the countries in different areas, and those are great as a start. But I think, the issue of scaling and helping and replicating is one that we're really going to have to examine going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nord. Building on that, another interesting area we believe to help mitigate labor shortages through automation. What could the government be doing to help incentivize automation, do you think?
Well, there was an excellent example of an announcement today. What I do want to speak about in automation is, before the pandemic, there was an interesting article that was coming out, and I remember it was creeping on, the end of 2019, where, robots were going to automate 50% of the jobs in Canada. And I think there's a lot of questions and almost scare tactics around this. But I think, a lot of what even BDC's report refers to here is the automation for good. It's taking, they're never going to be able to replace all humans all the time, but the ability to take, those more mundane or tasks that we don't have to do and bring forward, bring forward the workforce as well, not only in those niche areas, but across the board. So funding that, and it's there's the high tech niche areas, but it's the whole digitization of the country, and I would say society as well, bringing us along, I think would be very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nord. I will pose a similar question to Monsieur Clerroux or Madame Glenn. That in your study, in the BDC study, how to adapt to the labor shortage situation, you indicated that automation is particularly expensive for small and medium-sized enterprises, and that only 1 in 4 Canadian SMEs have fully automated at least one business function. In your opinion, what incentives do they need to make automation as a part of their business strategy?
Well, I think two things. I think, first of all, they need to understand how automation can help them. And we often, when we do conference with our clients, we give them example of businesses who have done it and the return on the investment. Our study is very clear. Businesses who are investing in automation, they perform better. They have a higher growth of profit and revenue. So that's the first thing, is to convince entrepreneurs that there's a big payoff for doing it. Second is, I think the program that was announced today is going to help financing that, because it's zero interest. There's two form of help. The first one is a plan. How can you invest in automation? And this plan is up to $25,000 and it's free. And the second part is a loan from BDC with zero interest rate. So I think that will help a lot of companies in Canada to be able to invest in technology and automation.
Monsieur Clerroux, you mentioned about that businesses perform better from a revenue perspective, but it's also indicated in your report that entrepreneurs who invest in new technologies and automation find it twice as easy to hire new workers. Why do you think that is?
Well, first of all, it's because they are growing, and also because they market themselves as, especially the new generation, they are looking for business who are up to date in terms of technology. I remember this conference I was giving, and there was a question to one of our clients, because she just explained that they changed their accounting system to make it all computerized. And the question was to this owner, how did your employee reacted? And she said, well, they were the first to ask for it. So when you invest in technology and you're really up to date, well, your employees, first of all, they don't do some routine tasks that they used to, so they like it. And especially the new generation, they want to work with the best technology, the newest technology. So that's the reason why it's easier for business who are who use a lot of technology to attract workers.
Thank you.
Madame Kusi. And now to Mr. Long for 6 minutes. Mr. Long.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon to my colleagues, and good afternoon to our witnesses. Thank you so much for your testimony this afternoon. It's very, very interesting. I, too, want to thank MP Zarrillo for bringing this motion forward. My questions will be for the Canadian Labour Congress. And before I start, I want to thank you for what you do for workers. As you said, Ms. Vipond, 3.3 million workers across this country. I want to thank you for your leadership and for your advocacy. I know your past president, Hassan Youssef, has been in my riding of St. John Ross many times. We laid wreaths together at the National Day of Mourning, and I always enjoyed my time when he was here. Our government has been an ally and friend of unions since coming to office. And I remember in 2015, one of the things that I was absolutely passionate about going to Ottawa was to fight for the repealing of, 377 and 525 with our bill C4 that repealed those. And I remember working with the CLC to make that a reality. We've engaged regularly with unions, stakeholders across the country in numerous areas of our economy. From energy workers to the building trades, from the care economy to the tourism and hospitality sectors, all of which are critically important in my riding. We've been there to address challenges facing these industries with government support and improvements to existing rules and legislation, such as the Canada Labour Code and occupational health and safety for federally regulated sectors. Despite healthcare being a provincial jurisdiction, legislated and regulated by their respective provinces, I do believe the federal government can still play a role in the hiring, the retention, and the retraining of staff while improving work conditions for all. Recognizing that healthcare is provincially delivered, what further opportunities do you see between unions, professional orders, and employees in the care economy and the federal government to deliver quality services? Thank you. Ms. Vipond.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, I appreciate the work we've been able to accomplish together. And I think during this last time with COVID, with this pandemic, has kind of highlighted the gaps within our systems, and healthcare is no different. And so when we look at that kind of patchwork, that's why we want to see like us coming together and looking at a commission of care work, which includes healthcare, so that it's safer. Because we're hearing, there's a study from CFNU around how people haven't felt safe at work over the last while, especially, and it's quite honestly appalling numbers. And so when we look at that, it has to be a bigger strategy. And yes, provinces have control over this, but the reality is that leadership can come from that framework that could happen across the country. And so we absolutely support that idea. And let's look at including more than just what our current kind of healthcare structure. I think we've seen in the long-term care that needs to be there. And there needs to be a priority put on the care that is given versus, a cost savings approach. This is about people needing the care and the people who are doing the care being treated appropriately and having good jobs.
Thanks for that. Additionally, what is the role the provinces and territories acting in their respective jurisdictions to improve the quality of care services in Canada?
Sorry, can you just repeat the beginning part?
Sure. What is the role the provinces in their jurisdictions can play to improve the quality of care services in Canada?
Absolutely. I think, when we talk about it in healthcare and childcare, I think those kind of frameworks are starting to exist across the country. Obviously, healthcare has been longstanding. Childcare is in the process of being written and what that looks like. And so the provinces play a role in that while working with the federal government. But why we want to see this a care commission and why we keep going back to that is so that we can include all of the care work into this commission and have that shared vision so that we can set standards of what this looks like so that it isn't just a privately delivered poor, poor standards. This has to be a high standard of care. And I think that is going to be these partnerships that are existing. And so we think that is the best scenario to put us forward. And we have some great examples of where that can succeed in healthcare and currently in the childcare framework that is being developed.
Thank you. Thanks for that answer. Chair, how much time do I have?
Minute.
Okay, continue with you, Ms. Vipond. As we know, the federal government provides funding to provinces and territories to help people prepare for and return to work under 2 labor market transfer agreements, the Workforce Development Agreement and the Labor Market Development Agreement. In your opinion, how have the WDA and the LMDA impacted the participation of vulnerable groups in the labor market, and to what extent would funding provided under these initiatives assist the healthcare sector and other sectors in the care economy?
I think how they do it is that we need to call it, and I think one of my fellow panelists called it, which is sometimes if we only look backwards, we're not planning forwards. And so we need to look at what we need moving forward, whether it's training, whether it's location of workers, and what are the incentives in terms of getting workers matched with jobs. And so those programs can be used as not just an investment, but then also as a planning so that we're not always in crisis mode, right? Like we can't always come to these meetings and go, what are we going to do right now? well, we know we need to train people. We know we need to look at matching people with jobs. So let's have a plan forward. And then that means that, whether it's in post-secondary, whether we're talking about immigration, whether we're talking about incentives for people to move to jobs, then I think we do a better way of pairing. And so those programs do give us an ability to distribute money education, but this has to be a forward-thinking thing. And so when it comes to the care economy, which we have to remember is 20% of workers in this country, then we have to look at a commission so that we can have a good plan moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Vipon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Long. Now to Madame Chabot for 6 minutes.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson, and thank you to all of our witnesses. My first question will be for Ms. Nord, if I'm not mistaken, from the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. Now, my question will give you an opportunity to, in fact, finish off your presentation. I know that you appeared before the Finance Committee as part of the study on the pre-budgetary consultations, and you had a recommendation to do with the chronic labour shortage to modernise the temporary foreign workers program. And you said in your opening remarks today that that's part and parcel of the solutions. Could you please elaborate on what you mean by modernising this? Response.
Thank you, MP, for the question, and happy to speak to the temporary foreign worker program and the need to modernize. We have a number of recommendations, and first and foremost would go back to some of those previous discussions had in the previous panel session here around need for LMIAs and the like of that. The Canadian Chamber of Commerce has long advocated for a trusted employers program. And there is a nexus model, and there is also a larger accreditation model. For those of you who have been on this committee for a while would have seen me speak to this any number of times. But something like a trusted employers program is going to help and assist with that, with those sorts of issues, and can say a lot more about that model. We have any number of recommendations around, an appeals process, bringing it online, allowing for, the ability to pool together temporary foreign workers who are here in Canada, who are now unemployed, that other employers can pull from them as well. We are also very and highly supportive of pathways to permanent residency for temporary foreign workers, and have supported many of the government announcements to this extent. What I will say, and there are issues absolutely with the temporary foreign worker program. I would say even with its name, there's a stigma that dates back, and in some cases for good reason. But what I would hate to see in any temporary foreign worker program, I appreciate it's temporary in nature, but one of the benefits of the program is a job offer and labor market integration from day one, and that sets people up for longer term success. So as much as we have issues and recommendations for modernizing the program, we also like to see it stay.
I'd just like to have the time to ask you a second question, if I may. Well, here it is. As far as a labour shortage is concerned, in certain specific sectors, the whole issue of temporary foreign workers is crucial as a solution. Maybe not a long-term solution, but a solution none all the same. And there's an issue, of course, in terms of labour market impact assessments and also work permits. So I'd like to hear your stance on that. But earlier, we talked about SMEs and manufacturers updating and modernising their equipment, that was one of the solutions. But they also need to undertake a digital shift. Throughout the pandemic, we've placed a lot of, we've seen how important it is to ensure that we buy local, that we have a digital strategy. So when it comes to addressing the labour shortage, What other programs can we use to help the SMEs through this digital shift? For example, the bank might wish to respond, or the Chamber of Commerce, whomever.
Well, what I could do is speak to the program that was just announced. So what I would emphasize, so this is the Canadian Digital Adoption Program. What I would emphasize is that this program falls in the remit of the Department of Innovation, Science and Economic Development, and they would be the primary spokespeople. That being said, BDC is contributing our efforts to this program. So what I can just describe is a high-level overview of the program. In Budget 2021, the government announced $4 billion for the Digital Adoption Program to provide funding and support to businesses, as well as training and work opportunities for young Canadians. There are two streams to the program. The first one is with a focus on e-commerce and providing micro grants to help particularly retail companies, for instance, to grow their reach. And then the second stream, the stream where BDC is participating, is focused on boosting your business technology. And that stream allows companies to apply for a grant to help them develop a digital adoption plan, and then leverage potentially funded work for youth placements. And in the context of that second stream, BDC is providing 0% interest loans as part of that stream to help SMEs adopt more complex technologies. Some specifics around the loans, they're up to $100,000. To implement a digital adoption plan, the application process is 100% online. It's a 5-year term with no payment in the first year, no personal assets taken as collateral, and no fees. So we're very happy to be able to contribute to that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now to Madame Zerillo for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm going to be asking Ms. Vipond about the rising violence and enforcement of some of the laws around that, and then to visit the Care Economy Commission. But I'm going to start just by asking Ms. Nord a question. Can't hear me? I'm going to start by, thank you. I'm going to start by asking Ms. Nord a question, and I appreciate your really inclusive language today. Thank you for that. I just wanted to ask about thinking about looking forward and about disaggregated data and how it's collected at the Chamber of Commerce. And I'm just wondering if you could let me know what kind of data is collected, if disaggregated data is collected around gender and race, and also if I could understand what is the fastest growing business type right now. And yeah, those are kind of my questions around looking forward.
Thank you, MP, for the question. Much appreciated. What I can say is that at this time, we do not collect data from our members, but we have just entered in the past 2 weeks an agreement with the Government of Canada and Stats Canada for a business data lab, and we'll have the ability going forward to look at a lot of this work, particularly from the demand side of the table. It will be forward looking, and we're actually in focus groups right now between now and the end of the year to make sure that we are inclusive as possible and look at these numbers. And one example I'll give is around labor force numbers. When we look at, it looks like from the data that women have bounce back and return to the workforce in full force. But we know, for example, there's, issues around productivity, around mental health issues. So it's numbers that help us look below that first level numbers and dig a little deeper into the stories as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. I'm going to go to Ms. Vipond and just talk about the unequal division of care and the overburden and undervalued and underpaid disproportionate work of women and women of color. So I just wanted to, you spoke about the rising violence, and I know federally there is some regulations around protection of care workers, or at least nurses. I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about what that violence looks like, and if enforcement has been happening, or if your members have talked about how enforcement is working.
Yeah, thank you for that question and bringing up a really important part when we talk about the care economy and we talk about the importance of long-term investments is when we look at the care economy, we're talking about women workers. And you were right, the legislation that came in the fall, which was going to assist with this kind of violence, is a welcome addition. This will mean that there is a possible criminal path when people are being harassed. The study I referred to in terms of CFNU was showing that in the last 12 months, 61% of nurses reported, violence, experiencing, a serious problem at work. And that looks like many items. That looks like whether it's, a manager, it looks like patients, it looks like the public. And the reality is that it makes not only these jobs unwelcoming if we're looking from it on a labor force, but it also means we have to put in more protection. So we support the steps taken in the fall. There is a lack of access sometimes to these kinds of rights if you are not unionized. So when we look at nurses, there's a high unionization, and that is very important. We also will have more specific numbers for you because us ourselves have partnered, and we have a study coming out at the end of this month, which is a survey around harassment. And the initial numbers, unfortunately, are reiterating what the story that we have heard, which is so many people don't feel safe at work. And so it's about legislation like that. It's also about supporting things like the C-190, which is, the ILO's convention when we look at where harassment and violence should not be allowed at work.
And I'm just going to go back to the Care Economy Commission. I wonder if you wouldn't mind just putting a little bit of visibility on maybe the top one or two things that you're discussing and your members are discussing about what that should look like.
Apologize, could you just repeat the first part of that?
Yeah, for sure. So in regards to the Care Economy Commission you spoke of, just wondering if you could share one or two things that the members are speaking about that need to be an integral part of a commission like that.
Absolutely. And so this Care Commission, what it looks like and what it does is really important. And the reality is that there's a really great roadmap for the commission that has been well established by the international labor organizations. They did a groundbreaking report called Care Work and Care Jobs. And in there, it really prioritizes the 5 R's, which is the framework around what decent care work should look like, which is to recognize, reduce, and redistribute unpaid care work. It's to reward paid care work by promoting more and decent work for care workers, and to guarantee care workers representation, social dialogue, and collective bargaining. And so we think that the Care Economy Commission could apply this framework in Canada, which is all encompassing and looking forward, so that we're putting ourselves in a better in a better place to be able to build a care economy that is going to work for everybody.
Thank you. Okay, we'll leave it then. Thank you.
Mr. Leipert for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have a specific question, but a couple of observations and then maybe ask for some comment relative to it. It seems to me that in looking at some of the programs that are announced, tend to work at cross purposes relative to some of the issues that are being encountered. I use as an example, maybe first let me say that, and I believe it was in the previous presentations, but it might have been at the beginning of this, that, and I can't remember if it was a percentage, but a high percentage of our labor force vacancies are in areas that require less than a grade 12 education. So then we turn around and we focus much of our programming at educating people. Then we talk about digitization, and I assume that, or technology. I assume that when we're talking about job vacancies that are being unfilled, that require less than a grade 12 education, you're probably talking about workers in the service industries. You're talking about long-term care. You're talking about child care. So digitization and technology improvements is going to do very little for these vacancies. But yet we trumpet out a $10 daycare program, which is fine, but what does it do? It creates a greater demand for spaces in daycares, and that's where we have the vacancy. So it just seems like there's a lot of cross purposes in what we're actually doing. They're probably being implemented and announced and for the right reasons, but to me they look like they're working at some cross purposes. I guess I'd just like to get a comment whether I'm reading that correctly or whether that is in fact the case.
Or all three? You have the floor.
Well, maybe I can try to answer. Shortage of labor is really in every sector of the economy, also every type of professional work or type of workers. For example, in Canada, one of the biggest issue in terms of shortage of labor is people who work in technology. Technology is booming. Technology services there's a big demand for technology services. So we don't have enough people to work in technology. So that's an example. And the idea of investing in technology doesn't replace people, but it could replace tasks. And it could be a complicated task, or it could be a more simple task. For example, you can buy a software today to make reservation in a restaurant. So that doesn't replace a person, but it does replace a task that the person can do. So the issue, the solution is really complex because it really depends of every business model, but the issue is here to stay. So that's what we are saying to our clients. You need to have a strategy because it's not going to go away. And the strategy is different for every business, every sector.
I think we do know, and when we're looking at the care economy, there is a lower ability for automation. Care economy is really about people caring, and whether that's healthcare, education, like from young people, adult, and to the end of our lives, we need care work, and that is. So automation isn't going to solve that. That's going to be about reducing costs and not increasing the care that people need. And so when we look at this mismatch of jobs and say there's vacancies and nobody's taking them, I think we need to do a deeper dive into that, because you're right, some of them don't have requirements of maybe a grade 12, but many of them are skilled work, and we're not recognizing that. And by not recognizing the skill that people need means we don't have the wages to match that. We don't have the benefits. And so people aren't staying. We know that there's a high turnaround in care work, whether you talk to childcare providers, within healthcare, long-term care, like homes that support people. And that turnaround, I think, is because of the quality of the jobs and the quality we put, or the value we put on that work. And that is primarily women. And we need to start realizing how important care work is to our society, because no work can happen without care work existing. And so that value needs to be there. And when people are paid well, are treated well, and have access to their rights in their job, they're more likely to stay. So as a retention program, investing in the people who work in this industry and in this sector is the best thing that we can do.
Thank you, Mr. Leifert. Not sure the very important point you made was addressed. We'll now go to Mr. Collins for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And my first question or questions would be to Ms. Nord. And we heard in the last presentation from department representatives, they made the statement that while temporary foreign workers play a critical role in filling jobs in the agriculture, food, and fish processing sectors, in fact, 80% are working in agriculture, it's important to underscore that they only make up 0.4% of the labor force. And so that number caught me. And I want to follow up on the questions that Member Ruff and Madame Chabot talked about earlier, and that is the Temporary Foreign Workers Program. And my question would be around what Madame Chabot spoke to, and that was the modernization plan that you referenced earlier. And so I have been working with sectors, food and beverage sector in Hamilton, agri-food sector in Hamilton, about the Temporary Foreign Workers Program. And, we're in uncharted territory here with the pandemic in terms of labor shortages. and they're asking for numbers, I think, in the range that we haven't seen before. And so I'm anxious to assist them with their requests, but of course that we need to find a balance, and I think you kind of messaged that in your earlier comments to some of the answers, with some of your answers. And so my question would be, with your modernization plan, what sectors have you found need the most assistance, and how do we find that balance in terms of providing a higher level of support without disadvantaging the broader labor pool that's out there and maybe putting too many eggs in one basket? Through you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, thank you, MP, for that question. It is an excellent question, and I think it's whether you talk, and we can talk about temporary foreign workers specifically, but writ large. I think this comes back to the importance of labor market information when you talk about the immigration levels in the country and where how many immigrants should we let in and in what professions. We need that sort of information to drive it, and not only from a professional point of view, but also from a region geographical point of view as well. One of our we've got pillars of recommendations, and the first one is the continued devolution of the immigration selection process in this country, recognizing its federal jurisdiction, but process that started with provincial nominee programs, headed to Atlantic Canada there with the Atlantic Immigration Program, and now these pilots, the rural and northern immigration pilots, for communities by communities is really the way forward. I heard comments earlier, not only about rural, but even there's populous areas outside of those 3 or 6 centers that can use the help. The issue right now in this country is that the labor shortage isn't discriminating. It isn't discriminating by region or geography or profession. We need all workers across the board everywhere, right? We do, and this is multi-stream. We need to look at immigration. We need to look at, but this is an opportunity, right? Let's start thinking like we haven't before. Let's put labor and business and government in a room and have these discussions and look what it looks like. It is going to take those who are long-term unemployed and underutilized as well. And I think, this is a real opportunity, but what drives this is data and information. And this is the first step that we need going forward.
Thank you. Can I follow up with your reference to pilot programs? They're done for a reason. We test the waters at all levels of government to try to find out what works and what should gravitate from a pilot program to a permanent policy or pool of funding or support, whether it's operating or capital. So can I ask through you, what pilot programs have worked recently, and which of those would you see transitioning into something that's more permanent?
Yeah, there are a number of those, and what I would argue around the continued devolution is you can't have a pilot project in every jurisdiction or every riding in this country, right? Then we have to start looking at from going from pilot to incorporating it into the larger stream as well. Again, COVID did throw a wrench into the rural and northern pilot programs. So the data is a little bit delayed there, but again, by community, for community. And the other thing I would say about those programs that differentiated them from even previous programs was that it was the involvement of the business community from the outset in those communities, whether it be a chamber or an ECDEV or the local municipality. So you had them on board at the beginning in the labor market integration. As far as pilots go, we're very happy with the agri-food pilot program, of course, and I know I'd even defer to my labor colleagues here as well. I just last week heard some fantastic stories about Maple Leaf Foods working with their union on the integration through the temporary foreign worker program. So those pathways to permanent residency just don't happen on their own and materialize. It's a social dialogue with all parties involved. Thank you.
Thank you for those answers. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
And this has concluded the hour with our second panel. I want to thank the witnesses, and actually it was this part of the discussion that I would like to have been a committee member. so I could participate. This is an interesting area. Mr. Van Byen, you have a point of order?
Yes, Mr. Chair. We had a lot of references to specific studies that we received both from Labor, from Finance, and from the Chambers of Commerce. And I don't know whether or not they've submitted those reports. And if they haven't submitted those reports, could we request those reports and the recommendations of those reports? There's a lot of really great information here. And I'd like to have the advantage of the fulsomeness of the reports.
Thank you, Mr. Bynum. We will, Van Byen, we will request those witnesses that appeared, if they were referencing from specific reports, if you could provide a copy to the committee clerk for the benefit of all committee members, that would be greatly appreciated. So thank you on that. So thank you, witness, for appearing. We will just. I'll ask for a moment because there's one item that I would like to bring to the committee. So thank you, witnesses. While they're going, I have received a notice from the minister that she is available to appear before the committee on March the 24th. As Minister Qualter recalled the last time there was a translation problem. They now have it worked out, so, but I need the committee's consent. Madame Ferrara?
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Would it be possible to inform the Minister that she should come for the mandate letter and for the mains, appear regarding the mandate letter and the main estimates?
Yes, committee members? $2 hours. Madame Ferrara, is that then 2 hours?
I'm sorry?
2 hours then?
Yes.
Okay.
There would be
1
heure, Madame le...
1 hour for the minister, a second hour for the officials, but 2 hours with them together for the whole period.
Yeah. Well, that's what the meeting will be for 2 hours on mandate letter and the mains. Yep. We can extend the invitation to the minister for that, as is known to the committee. We cannot compel the minister to say. So if there's agreement, I see consensus from the committee that the minister will appear on the 24th. We'll request for a 2-hour meeting on mandate letter and on mains, and we will take direction from the minister.
Oui, Monsieur le Président.
Chair. Mr. Chairperson, so the minister would be here for 1 hour and then a second hour for the department. But it's my understanding we can't have the minister for 2 hours. Is that correct? The minister can only be here for 1 hour. Why can't we have the mandate letter and the mains being looked at in the same meeting? Otherwise, we're going to lose another committee meeting. I don't see why we can't have the minister here for at least an hour and do both at the same time.
It's my understanding the minister advised she would be available for the first hour, but the meeting will deal with the minister could be questioned on any one of those, but it would be the ministers will be here for an hour, and officials will stay if that's the wish of the committee. Do we have consensus in extending the invitation to the minister for the 24th? Yep.
I'll think about it. We might put a motion forward for another hour then, because in good faith, I said like we would just do once for the mains and for the mandate letter. But like I said, I feel like we are we are accommodating in that it is one that is reasonable to me. But I don't know why she can't extend her time for 2 hours, because as we saw, an hour goes by very quickly. So we can bring her for one, but I mean, if I feel one is not sufficient after that, then I may call her back to go back to the supplements. Like I just
And Madame Kuzi, motions are always
I
debatable
won't
on
make
the floor.
one, of course,
Yeah,
now. But
okay.
like I said, for now we'll bring her for the 1 hour. Thank you.
Okay, I'm seeing consensus. I see no objection, so the minister will be appearing for an hour, confirmed on the mandate letter and on the mains, and we'll take it from there. Thank you, committee members. With that, meeting adjourned.